All right, so I'm just going to view the published site, just like anybody else would. Just kind of walk you through the front side of it.
Mm-hmm.
I built in a cool widget on the landing page. I used your guys' core values, so I just built in a little HTML kind of
No.
CSS move thing, just to make some fun stuff. So all the images, is to be noted, all the images I used were either Sextant ones or they were just Google images that came off anything.
Mm-hmm.
I took them into Photoshop. I optimized them, got the pixels up, but then I web optimized them and made them progressive so that they will load really fast on either mobile or anything. Um, got your logo in there. I even put your favicon in there, so you got your little A thing on the favicon. Also, one of the biggest highlights and improvements that I had noticed with Google Sites as of recent, it's a new thing, is
Uh-huh.
you can put in a search content bar. So, for example, because it's a @Sextant Stays domain, you can go in here and just say, okay, I want to look at photos. Anybody can. And it'll literally link up to your Google Drive, so anybody can just search right from the site into Google Drive for stuff that they're looking for, and it'll give you
Well,
kind of results and stuff, which I thought was really cool.
mhm. Yeah, that's very useful, definitely.
And within that search model or modal, basically you have two tabs up top that says your entire organization, or you could search on just this site. So if like on just the site you had something that was like, hey, onboarding, they could search it and it would give a link right over to the onboarding page or whatever. They can click right into it. Whoops, let me make sure I'm signed in here. Yeah, there you go. So back to the homepage, there's that, and then there's also a search. It comes with it this way when you build it, but there's a search piece that searches the site only. But that's why I put it in the search organization content, so we would search the drive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I replicated exactly what I saw on your SharePoint, and
Yeah.
just gave you kind of spots of knowing where you could do certain things or what you were looking for. So like news and updates was on the main page. I just put a little thing like you could this just a text field, but you could just type in the backside and say taxes update. Nola now has a nightly tax, whatever. You can do something like that. And it'll just put a bunch of them in there, and it'll just keep adding to it.
Mm-hmm.
On the event section, very similar, same setup, but in this one you can just put some links in there. You can do whatever you want to do, like however you want to work that.
Mm-hmm.
You can also embed calendars. So if you have a company calendar or something like that that was like an event iCal or something for Google for your company, you could put that calendar in and it would actually show the calendar and the events and the times and all that stuff, and would be
Mm-hmm.
accessible to anybody that has access. One of the biggest foundational pieces about Google Sites is that it is a Google product. So that means that anybody in your domain, all of your sheets, all of your photos, drives, all your data that's housed in Google Drive follows
Mm-hmm.
the same sharing privileges. So meaning if I add on the guest experience tab a sheet and only 4 people and myself, who's the creator of that sheet, have access to it, but nobody else at Sextant Stays have it, they will just literally see an icon that says, Google, you must request access to see it when you click the link. And then
Mm-hmm.
follows the same thing. They click request access, sends that owner an email, and the email, and that person can go and give them the sharing privileges if they need. But I usually say best practice is everybody to make their sheets or their documents they're going to put up here. Just put it viewable for anybody at Sextant Stays. That way it's like they can view it, but they
Yeah.
can't. Unless it's sensitive information that's, senior leadership, you don't need to have anybody look at it or something. All right, so then I'll go into guest experience. Again, tried to use a Sextant Stays photo. I just kind of browsed around some of your stuff. I really like your that floating mansion, the Arcup property in Miami.
Yeah.
That thing is
That's
freaking sexy. So,
property.
yeah. How long have you guys had that one? It's probably been there for a while, huh?
Not for too long. We've had it since December.
December. Okay, cool.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, so you'll notice in here, instead of the links that you guys had, I'm going to pull the other one up here on the screen so you can see. So on here, you guys had just kind of just straight up text links. Um,
Yeah.
But what I ended up doing instead to make it a little more user friendly was I made buttons. So
Mm-hmm.
these are just buttons. They're totally formatable. You can do all the text. I copied as is just so that maybe it's an easier transition for your team, for anybody who's coming in and needs to go and say, okay, well, I did this over here. What's that file in the Google Drive? Okay. Oh, it's that button. Okay, I go edit, add the link in, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But pretty much just buttons. You can format and do what you want. I used your guys's branding. I got that from Brandy with the logoing and the colors and all that stuff, and I got all that stuff accurate. So there's guest experience. Another little bit of a setup in your property details. Looks like folks or yourself had created kind of a main section for everything, and then created kind of like a north, south, and New Orleans type of piece. So instead of having it built that way, I built your links up top, and then I just grabbed some stock images, and I just gave you hot links to individual pages for each of the north and south. That way it's kind of like a little bit easier and cleaner for a flow and a process. Just made a lot more sense to do that. So I did that, and then let's see, on reservations, very similar. There was quite a few different pieces that was in there. Obviously, you had all these FAQs and all this stuff. You know, I would recommend shortening down all these names and all this stuff, or even within these subcategories. I would probably recommend maybe whoever owns these pages or owns the editing of what this looks like to kind of really try to get main theme subjects of stuff to put things in, like you know, if it was a late checkout or early check-in, it's like, well, that's arrival departure. Maybe put that in one page itself, or put a link for just all those, instead of like, you know, kind of vomiting, so to speak, all of these different links that, you know, I know at Stay Offered, what I used the Google Sites for was really to help a lot of team in my team distribution. If we hired a new person, it was like, can I set them in front of our employee portal and team distribution, and can they go through and figure out how to kind of start getting familiar with the company, the processes and SOPs that we do in distribution. So that was kind of the mentality that I tried to make it happen.
And do this buttons actually link to the files on Google Drive, or?
No, because what I found is that within your SharePoint, it looks like everything had to be uploaded into SharePoint as like a Word file or whatever. It didn't look like it had many that were actually into Google Drives. So I couldn't really actually find the exact naming of those. So what I would say is that you're just going to need to have whoever owns these pages takes the exact same names of the links that they created over here, and then just go in and link it to the Google Drive file that they have and whatever it's named.
Yeah, I have access to all of those, so
okay,
I'll just.
And their exact name for name, I copied everything exactly, even the capital or lowercase. I did all the casing and all that stuff exactly the same, so it should be really easy to connect them together. Yeah, and that's the other part. I don't know if I have access to all those all those files in Google Drive as well. So so there's that on the reservations, and then you have emergency protocols. Pretty basic. Just put in some fun Google images just to kind of help a little more spunk to it for people. Software training, HR, finance, all the onboarding, all that stuff. Now, the other thing you'll notice too within these is, because this is how you can play, and I'll get into the editing side now because you kind of got the idea. But when you're in this, you can, when you're editing before things are published to the site, I mean, you can obviously just play around with the different sizing, whether it's a phone or mobile or desktop, which makes it really nice because if you're adding images or your buttons have really long text, you can see how it lines up if it works. Because the really big advantages for the local staff and people out in the field is that a lot of them are using their phones to do this. So it makes it nice when you know it's good and responsive down to that level. So
yeah, definitely. Most of our field people only use phones.
Yeah. So I guess starting off on the homepage, kind of for the editing side of things, This is just a HTML embedding that I did. Um, you can put in text boxes, which are literally just like this.
Mm-hmm.
You have limited formatting options. It's not like you choose a number of font, or like I want this to be underlined, or I want this to be whatever. But you have full HTML capability because you can just embed a box where you can embed a URL. So if you have like a scheduling app or you have something else, you can just click by URL, and then you can actually put in the URL, and it'll actually add an in-screen widget that'll actually allow you to navigate whatever URL that is. For example, like I had Google Data Studio for some reporting and stuff. I would just link right to Google Data Studio, and as again sharing permissions and all that stuff, as long as you had access, you could navigate the Google Data Studio report inside your portal and not have to leave the portal and go somewhere else to look at it. So it kind of makes it really nice for one-stop shopping as you want to get to the more advanced stages of sites.
Yeah.
The Again, this is that news and updates. All you got to do is, if you have another news or update, you just go ahead and hit duplicate and do the same thing, and then just change up your fields and whatever you want it to be. You can highlight all the text and link it, or you could just do one single individual word and link it, and then you just basically you can tie it to something in the property or in the website. So if it's like, hey everybody, just want to let you know that there's a new page that we added, and you can just put a link to that, and it takes them right to that spot instead of them having to navigate up in the top bar. Same thing down here. I put in a link just for fun. As like, hey, Halloween party. Well, it actually links off to another site. And it won't do this because I was in the editing side, but I did like a GIF, that was in there. You can link it to a GIF, or you could actually upload an actual image and a GIF to it, and it'll just have it there. You can link to YouTube videos. You can do anything you want for those that will actually put them right where you need it for that aspect. I've got some dividers in there, just some basic stuff, so you can have your dividers. You can do placeholders. So like if you're designing a page and you don't want to publish it yet, and you say, hey, Joe Schmo, this is going to be your page, and then you build out just the foundational structure, you can just go put a placeholder, and you can just leave it, be like, okay, and then you can put like text underneath and say, this is where your main picture header is going to go, or this is whatever, and you can kind of architect it so that it's very collaborative and helps with things. You can put in Google Maps into there, which are you can build your own maps in Google Maps on there. You can go to your My Maps and put something in, or you can just use Google Maps and zoom into a certain spot, and then you can drop it and drop the place mark. So if you wanted to build out a familiarity page for the company that says, hey, what are your locations and where are they at, you can create map pins for each of your locations and put a map pin on the page if you wanted to. Then you can also link everything from your drive. So if you click on drive, you'll look for anything you have in there, and you can just put it up there. You can do your Google Sheets where it's not just a hot link, but like say on one of your guest experience tabs or something, you have like this arrival sheet, whatever that is. And that like, hey, I don't necessarily want people to just go click into it. I want them to see it all the time because it constantly updates with new arrivals or new things up top, like newest to oldest. Well, you could actually just do the embed with the URL to that Google Sheet, and that'll show up as its own little widget viewable in there as well. And that goes for like charts and stuff like that too. So you can see down here, it's like you can embed the sheet, or you can do a form. So like you could put a Google form in here if you need your staff to fill out a survey, fill out an inspection form or something. You can put the form right into the web page, and they can actually use it and fill it out on the web page without having to leave to go to Google Forms or anything else, which for your local staff using it on a mobile phone would be very helpful if you guys do inspections that way or something. Let's see, what else do we have? So on the Pages tab, you can see kind of the structure of the site. So subpages are basically done with a drop-down arrow, and you can just take a look at how the hierarchy is set up there. Themes you probably won't need to mess with too much, but themes are basically just how the whole site looks, and it follows a simple set of rules. Um, the
Yeah.
the font styles you can choose are light, classic, and heavy for this simple setup, and then it's the custom colors what you can do. So you can use any one of these and do your own custom color if you wanted to change it up if you need. So some of the really big pieces for you on this side of things is going to be really centered around the sharing permissions of the site. So so the way this works, because I know you said that you had structured kind of like on the SharePoint where it was like you gave editing access to certain pages to certain people to go put in data or go put in stuff and do things. Google Sites doesn't work exactly that way, but you can actually say, hey, all right, well the director of guest experiences is Johnny, and the director of property details is so and whatever. You can just basically say those folks have edit access to the site. But when you do that, you have two different sharing options that is not common in any other Google product that they offer, which is one is draft restricted, or it's called draft. Basically, you can choose if somebody has draft privileges, you can choose who gets to see and make draft changes to the site. The publish to site means who can actually click the button that says publish and pushes those changes to the site. If that makes sense. So, for example, I'm going to go ahead and add you right now. And you are a full-fledged editor. So that means that you can edit, you can do whatever you want. If I put you as a published viewer, that just means that you can view published pieces of the site and whatever happens with that. So I'm going to send you that. You'll have the editing access to do whatever you need to do in it. But down here where we have all these draft restricted, so we would say, okay, I want anybody at Sextant to be able to make draft changes or do something. And then also for publishing, all that kind of thing. So what happens is, say Joe, who's the director of guest experience, goes in and makes a change. And I'm going to just do one small change so it actually registers here. Any change, I just added an S to this. Any change that happens, basically you can go and say review changes and publish. And so it basically does like a true website design where it'll show you the draft of what somebody is actually changing something to. So we were in, I think we were in guest experience. Oh no, right there. It tells you on the left-hand side what was updated. So the home button was updated, and then also updated reservations. And it'll show you what changes were made. So it highlights in green, says here, somebody made this change. And then it says what is currently published. So you can see what is actually live and out there, and then you can see what is not, and what they're recommending. And then you can choose to say, yeah, go ahead and publish it. If you don't want to publish it, just don't do anything, go backwards, and then just go message that person and say, hey, on your page, there was this change made. Did you really want this to happen? Or I don't know if this is a good idea, or whatever. You can do your dialogue. So, but I think that's probably the most important pieces for you as far as the, understanding of the publish, because if you really want to kind of not micromanage it, but just make sure that nobody does anything stupid and like accidentally deletes an entire page or deletes something, that's probably the best way to kind of throttle it. And I mean, you could probably set it depending on what your workflow is and how you want to handle it, but you could do it in a way that's like, hey, guys, once a week I'll go ahead and publish any new changes to the site unless it's an emergency, and then you just send me an email and I'll go figure it out or something.
Right.
So
okay.
That is pretty much the gist of it. The only other thing for you to consider here is in the actual settings bar. You'll notice there is navigation, your branding images. So that's what the logo is showing right here. I did alt text on some of the images too, so that you get a little bit of SEO value if you ever decided you wanted to turn it fully public and be able to generate some traffic. And there's your favicon. Viewer tools, you can connect up your Google Analytics. So if you wanted to see behavior of who's using what pages, you could actually put in your Google Analytics tracking ID for your actual your Sextant Stays domain that you use for your normal website. You could also put this in as a subfield, like they have for like YouTube channel and other stuff. you could put that in. You could actually see who's viewing what. That would take a little bit more work that you could have somebody figure out, which would be I don't know if you're familiar with UTM campaigns trackers, but they're basically like a source medium. A source medium and campaign. So basically in Google Analytics, it'll allow you to see a specific behavior of a link. So for example, if I said on this image here, on this image here, I have a link that's on it that goes to FAQs by the guest. Well, what I could do is I could, instead of using what Google is generating here, I could go over to FAQs by guest, the actual page. I could copy this actual URL and I can add a UTM tracker code that's on there. I could add it to the end of it. It doesn't change the way the behavior of the page loads or does anything. It does it like normal, except for it just puts this tracking little piece into the URL that then you could see how many times that image or anywhere you put that link is at. So you'd go back to, for example, you go back to the main reservation page and I would change this link. Instead of saying by the guest, I would put in that actual URL with that little tracker link on it. And then that would allow me to see in my Google Analytics how many times people are clicking on FAQ. Now, this is an employee portal, so it's not really related to like marketing and conversion behavior that you probably want to see from like guests and stuff purchasing your product. But if it was something that was an interest to you to say, are you guys even looking at these reports, or are you even looking at this thing that you build out? It might be interesting. I'd probably do it just because I'm kind of a geek that way.
Yeah.
But so there's that, and that's pretty much it. The only last thing is if you did want to use a custom URL, I will show you. So this is my own personal website. I do photography on the side, and I built mine through Google Sites. But when I go to view the published site, you'll notice it says sites.google.com because that's saying what that published site is. But what I did is I own the domain of dougtruittphotography.com. That site is feeding off of my URL that I own as a domain. So obviously you guys own the domain of sextantstays.com, I'm sure. What you do is basically in here, once you turn the site to public instead of being only for people on at Sextant Stays, it gives you this option to put in a custom URL, and you can go through and add your custom URL through your domain host server. That'll allow you to basically put, so when people want to say, I just want to go to sextantstaysportal.com, they could do that, and it could be a derivative of your actual sextantstays.com if it was an interest to you. I don't know if that is. It's just I want to make sure that you understand that is an option. If somebody, you have a developer or anybody says, hey, can we just get this onto our normal website so that it's just way for somebody to access? You can, and the same rules would still apply with the Google sharing. If Joe Schmo, who's a guest, accidentally clicks on your employee portal page, they may be able to go and see like the homepage, and they may be able to land here and see this stuff. But if you have any embedded Google Sheets or anything with sharing privileges, and they're not a part of Sextant Stays domain and logged in as a Sextant Stays domain account, they're not going to have access to see any of that stuff. So it's relatively protected if you do public. But again, like I say, I realize it might be a moot point, but it definitely is something worth sharing and considering that you may think about. So
yeah, definitely. You could do like Sextant Stays /portal or something /employees. Okay.
You totally could. Yes.
So how do you let's say we go back to the buttons, right? You just I would just right click on that and add a link to like any specific document.
Yeah, actually you don't have to right click. You can just double click. And here's a couple different setups. So these are different styles. So that's filled. You can do outlined, which I kind of like outlined in some of those pages. You might want to change it between hierarchy of pages, or you could just do straight text. It's a button, but it just shows as text, kind of very similar to what you had on SharePoint. If you want to change the link, all you do is double click, And then when it pops up, you have your name heading you can just change, and then you just put in a link. You have to put in a link with this button set up. You can't leave it blank or it won't let you save it. So that's why every one of these you'll see have placeholder, just because I typed placeholder and it turned it into an HTTP. But literally all you do is out of Drive, if you have a, let's see, let me get a,
so we have let's say we have a Google Drive.
I think I have access to some stuff. I'll just do one generically. We'll see here. Let's see. Okay, so I'm just going to grab this thing, whatever this is, if I have access to it. Okay, so all I would do is literally just copy this URL, go back to my portal, I go ahead, edit, or double click, one or the other. I just paste that in, hit update, and then if I go ahead and publish it, now when I view the published site, I should be able to click Arrival, and it takes me right to the Google spreadsheet. Now, like I said, you can do, you can also do the embedding too, which I'll show you that because that's pretty cool. Because I used to do this for like charts and stuff all the time. But you can embed that same link that I had copied in my pasteboard, and you'll see it shows like this, right? So if I insert it, so now it's inserting that Google Sheet right into the page, and it actually even has tab buttons. Now you can't click on those to see what they do right here when you're in edit, but when you go to preview it, you go down here, you'll notice the spreadsheet loads, it scrolls, it moves left and right, it does everything it would do if you were in Sheets itself, with just without all those extra formatting tools and things like that. You can go between all those things, which is super cool because it just makes things so much easier, and it allows people to be more creative, because if they're like, hey, I just want to build a schedule, who's on right now, they could literally just make a Google Sheet and make it a little bit pretty or whatever, and then you just embed it and it goes right in. You can also, when you do the embedding, it has a little link up in the top right, so if somebody really needs to get to it, then it just takes them right to the Google Sheet.
Yeah.
So when we found this thing, I was like blown away. I was like, oh, Google's really trying to piss off every web development software company in the world, because this is all free with a Google account. And I was just like, wow, you can do your own domain URL, plus you can embed all this stuff and everything else, and it's like none of these other companies really have that, or if they do, they're going to charge you up the yin yang for it. So
yeah.
And then
so how
yeah, go ahead.
Sites.google.com.
Yeah, you go sites.google.com is where you go. And then you should have an email from when I just shared it with you.
You wanted to say something. I interrupted you.
Oh no, you're good. I think that was all I had on that part. I think you can even embed like search drive directories. So for example, I've got this URL for this landing page of where I'm at here. You could even embed that, and that should. No, I guess you can't. Oh, because of site permissions. It'll display as a text link because not everybody has the viewing privileges on that one. But that's because it was just this main Google Drive. But if like you're a guest services team in here, you could probably maybe do that one. I don't know. Let's see. No, I guess. Well, it does. It just won't embed it. It makes it a link on that. I guess when you get to dedicated files, when you're inside the file, it'll let you embed that file, but not maybe the drive.
Okay.
The other thing is too, you'll notice there's a difference in like the color background here on this text box. So this text box is sitting within this window pane, so it's just there. So like if I add a text box, it's just going to create another pane for you to look at, which are these options over here. And then the little brick thing allows you to like move it wherever you want it to go. But the theme settings, so like for example, this row right here of 3 buttons. If I set the background, I got these different options I can choose from. So I can do this like light gray one. I can do the high emphasis 2, which is your blue, and it'll invert your buttons so that it's readable. So that's why you don't have to do a ton of extra formatting and customization to make it look good. It'll intuitively do it. And then you can also choose an image too. So you can upload an image over the background of an area. So you could, put the Expedia group logo if you wanted to, and then it'll adjust it and put it right behind the buttons in that window pane if you wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
And it does this kind of cool, funky thing here. It does this little stars. It's called, it adjusts for readability. So it automatically defaults to that, but if you want to take that off, then it'll just do exactly what you uploaded in there. But put it back to the regular. What was the other piece? Oh, on my distribution one, which might be something you may want to build out a marketing page or a distribution page or something. I used to actually just drop in images for like the Expedia logo that I just did. Let's see. There you go. So I put in the Expedia logo, and then off to the right you can put in, and you can shrink this thing down and do whatever you want to do. But what I would do is I'd add in a little text box over top or right next to it, and I would just put username, and it was Doug at sextantstays.com, and essentially you just format it all around, and then you just turn this image into a link and put it to the Expedia Partner Central like extranet, and then that way it's like if somebody in distribution is needing to get to one of the channels or the extranets, you basically just click there and go to those extranets with the username and passwords and all that stuff. I think that was one of the most valuable pieces that we found with our Google Sites setup, was being able to make sure that everybody had the credentials to get logged into certain channels and stuff. And most of the channels do 2-part verification authentication, so it's like they'll text a verification code to a phone number or something like that. So
okay.
I think that's probably about it. Do you have any questions or anything there? I mean, I know it's a lot to take in, but I think I've got you pretty set up at a good foundational level to at least pick up where you left off at SharePoint, and it looks a little better too.
Yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory. Just gotta know all of these little functions and try to start playing around with it.
Helpful with that is add another page in here, or at least a link, or maybe you can add footers. I forgot. So you could add a footer, and then you could create a Google form maybe that says, hey, give me your feedback. And then they could just click that form, because that footer will show up on every page. And then you can just have it be like, leave us your feedback. What do you think about this? Or what would you like better, or something? And then they could just submit a form, and then you can just go see those Google form responses and let that kind of help mitigate, so you don't have to deal with a bunch of emails and random things. Be like, yeah, on that one page that looked like this or that, whatever. I mean, you could just customize the Google form so it actually looks like follows the hierarchy of your pages. So
yeah, cool.
And then one thing I would say too is since I am Doug at sextantstays.com who created this. I don't know of an actual way to transfer the ownership of the actual thing, so I wouldn't get rid of my Doug at Sextant Stays domain, just to make sure that you don't lose anything on it. The one thing you could do too is you could make a copy of this whole site You can, I believe it's, oh yeah, you would go into your Google Drive and you would just search for, I think it's titled Sextant Stays. Let me modify that. Employee. So employee portal, and then just search for that in the Google Drive, and because you have access to it, you should be able to find it in here, and you could just go and say make a copy. And when you make that copy, it's making a copy of everything in that site, and it's keeping it protected, and you are now the owner of that copy of the site. So if you needed to get rid of my domain for some reason, or my user, you can. Just make sure you do that and make a copy of it first, so that way at least you have it under your credentials and your ownership, if that makes sense.
Got it. Okay.
You'd obviously have to go through the site and just make sure everything is all working, links are fine. They should be, because nothing was bad. It's just mostly now that you're the owner, it'll change up some of the access permissions and stuff like that. You may have to re-invite people to be, editors on your site.